I gotta, I'm gonna open the meeting and by roll call vote, but I didn't have the agenda open myself. Let's open the meeting by roll call vote. And we've got Lydia Clancy.
Here.
Mara Hogan.
Here.
Mary Branley.
Here.
Natasha Rivera.
Here.
Bethlyn Houlihan here. And with that in mind, then the first thing we are going to do is I'm going to open the agenda so I can read this correctly. I apologize. I usually have it open ahead of time, and it's been a day. All right, so.
Can somebody get me a pair of headphones that work?
Yep. Here I am. Works.
Oh, it worked. All right. Yay. And then we want to make sure everyone that's great. Okay, perfect. So pursuant to Governor Baker's executive order dated March 12, 2020, suspending certain provisions of the open meeting law, internal law, C330A, Section 20, the school committee has modified meeting procedures to ensure the safety of all participants. The public will not be allowed to physically access the school committee meeting in person, but video and audio will be turned off for the public, but you can attend as you are now virtually. It will be held via virtual meeting via internet using Zoom technology. And the meeting information is here. And just for everyone to be aware, this meeting is being recorded. And so please be aware that it will be posted. And if anyone else is recording, just ask that you let us know. You could just send me an email so that we can make everyone that is here on the call aware. And the first thing we are going to do then after saying that is we're going to be moving into executive session under Mass General Law, Chapter 30A, Section 21A2 to conduct strategy sessions in preparation for negotiations with non-union personnel with intent to return to an open meeting. We are going to time ourselves so that we are coming back in 45 minutes. So with that in mind, we should see invitations from our super Colleen.
We need to do roll call to enter.
Oh, we do. I'm so sorry. You're right.
Sorry.
No, you may need to remind me. I may need more prompts today just to be.
It's a lot of roll call when you have an executive session in the beginning. It's roll call to open, roll call to enter, roll call to end.
Yes, indeed. So we're going to go by roll call to enter into executive session for the reason I just described with intent to return to the public meeting. Lydia Clancy.
Here. Yay.
Mara Hogan.
Yes.
Mary Branley.
Yes.
Natasha Rivera.
Yes.
Bethlyn Houlihan, yes. Okay, we will now move into executive session at 7:05.
Bethlyn?
Yes.
I'm sorry, who other than school committee? Mary Jane is going with you to executive session?
Yep.
Brian.
Yeah.
Brian.
And
Jennifer.
Say it
Jennifer.
again.
How about
I'm
Irene?
muted. Sure. Happy to.
Jennifer and Irene?
Irene also, right? She should be, yeah.
Okay, I'm sending it. Do you have invites? Let me see.
Oh, here we go. All
There you
right. All right, we'll be back.
We all did it.
Unmute.
Everybody back?
I'm telling you, it
Unmute.
feels very like teleporting. It's like,
Unmute.
beam me up, Scotty, and all of a sudden you're in like another place.
Oops, unmute. Unless Mary Jane wants to stay muted. Okay. So right now, just to be clear, we school committee members are unmuted. So we returned to executive session. I'm going to exit the screen at 7:56 p.m. I mean, to the public meeting, sorry. I'm going to misspeak a bunch, so you're going to have to catch me tonight because my brain is fried. 7:56 p.m. So we're back. Thank you, everybody. So,
You roll call again?
no, I don't think so.
I think it's just to open the meeting because we didn't end it.
Yeah, because we opened the meeting and then we did roll call to go into executive session. We did roll call to go out of executive session, and we're still in the meeting in the context of the full meeting. Yeah. Okay. So next, we're just gonna refer to the agenda here. So what we wanted to do next was really consider, this was framed in a particular way as planning considerations of COVID-19, and that was inclusive of consideration of what has, I know we've received a lot of feedback on the principal scope of work in that context, particularly the dual principal model consideration of the curriculum and instruction and assessment principle, and then the I want to call it,
Leadership.
thank you. I keep calling the building principle leadership and operations. So with that in mind, I think what we wanted to do is start with this flow of conversation. So we have 45 minutes to do this. 7:57 now, about what we're looking at and any anticipation of what's going to be needed in relation to COVID-19. Anyone else want to say anything about what they'd hope to get out of this discussion and conversation on this agenda item number 3?
I just think that the information that Jennifer and her team were able to put together, this might be pretty relevant to that, because I think she kind of touches on a lot of those aspects. And I think for our own self, but also for public awareness, I think it's really important to highlight what the discussions are happening at the school level regarding this matter.
So do you want to take a look at the document and discuss it, or how do you want to proceed?
Do we want to, is this something we can share? Is this, I know that they do that in some of the other meetings, but
Share.
yeah, like share, I don't know if Bethlyn or Colleen.
Either one. Colleen, what do you want? I'm happy to share screen share it if you like.
If you have it up, go ahead.
Yeah.
As we're doing this, I just want everyone to be very much aware that these are very preliminary conversations, looking at the CDC guidance that was released last week and the governor's guidance that was released on Monday. This should not be considered inclusive or exclusive of any conversations related to potential iterations of remote learning, hybrid learning, issues that we might face opening in the fall.
These are just assumptions. Thank you for framing that, Jennifer, because this is hot off the press, and as we know, things can change tomorrow. So,
Correct.
Okay.
And we got some directives today, so
You
so it
mean,
may change tomorrow.
yeah. Okay. So is it productive, constructive to be able to present that now, or is it going to literally, it's going to change tomorrow? And so
what maybe I can talk through what
Yeah.
the task was. So we have each building, as I believe I've mentioned before, has formed a reopening committee. In total, that those reopening committees exceed 70 members of faculty and staff across the district that are considering options for reopening and procedures and protocols that will need to be put in place. We had our first meeting of representatives of each of those committees to a district committee that will oversee the creation of the district reopening plan, obviously understanding that each building and each grade level is nuanced in the way in which these structures may look or take place. So when we met, we received a summary of what the buildings had been talking about in their very preliminary meetings. We then took a look at the CDC guidelines, the one-page document about reopening of schools that was released last Friday. I guess there has been an additional CDC document that someone sent me that I have not verified as an actual CDC document that is not included in this analysis. We also took a look at the governor's reopening plan and looked at the phased approach, but then also looked at the components of reopening that would be present throughout all 4 phases. And the way we framed it was, what are the assumptions that we can make given this information about what we will need to include in our reopening plans. We tackled that in terms of general assumptions, in terms of health and safety related to social distancing, requirement of masks, and so on. We also made some instructional assumptions based on what the plans might look like. We talked about some social emotional assumptions of what we may be tasked with dealing with for our students and our families and our staff, and then some communication assumptions about how to make sure that we are more prepared in that capacity. So we created that list of assumptions. The document that you have, there had been a request that I provide sort of preliminary context for what budget implications might be given reopening. And so what I did was I went through each of those assumptions with the conversations that our team had on Tuesday to indicate where we likely would need to spend, whether it be within our current operating budget or, more importantly, where we may be exceeding the plans for our operating budget. There were, I think, 4 specific areas that we thought could result in expenses that exceeded, that were not planned for in the operating budget. So Bethlen, maybe if you show those, that might be more helpful. And then the detail can be published because it's I think it's a 6 or 7 page document.
It is.
Yeah, yeah.
So are those at the top, the high level? That's the
Yeah.
first page essentially. Okay, that's cool. That makes sense because that I want people, for all of us in the community, to be able to see what the thoughtful planning that's being done right now and understand and we're all trying to wrap our heads around this, but also I think to consider what else you may need to before release of some of those details. I think that makes sense if you're not, I don't want to mislead either.
No, I'm fine to show the whole document. I just don't know people
It's
won't be
might
able
not
to
be
read.
useful.
They're
Yeah.
not gonna be
Well,
able to read it on the
I
screen.
mean, the reality is it's part of public meeting, so it should be accessible anyway, just to be
Yeah.
honest. So, so I don't think there's anything in the document that it's as it's known, it's a draft document. And I think one of the things I mentioned to Jennifer, it would be helpful to have potentially like a living document at some point because things change so much. So,
Right. I just meant in terms of showing it up on a screen share.
yeah.
Sharing a whole
What's
document
useful
on a
for
screen
people
share.
to see.
Right.
Yeah. So here are what the top of this is essentially what Jennifer already just explained about how they're organizing themselves for planning for with the reopening committees. And then there's also the district reopening committee. And here's the high level, what she was referring to as the areas where they saw that there would actually be potential budget implications for staffing needs. So
Outside of budget.
outside
right?
of the current operating budget projected for the FY21 fiscal year. I just repeated myself. So do you want to describe that, Jennifer, or whoever would like to just run through this?
Yeah, I can. So essentially what we talked about, and again, detail below in the document, if folks take a look at it, within the general protocols, the CDC guidance and the state guidance requires that organizations that open, whether it be through this phased approach in Massachusetts or schools specifically with the CDC, be able to screen people coming into the building in order to determine whether they've had exposure to COVID-19 or have symptoms, at which point there needs to be a protocol in place to isolate those individuals should they have that and deal with it accordingly. Additionally, there needs to be follow-up components that are elucidated within the other steps of the CDC recommendations. And so based off of all of that, we anticipated that we would likely need to see an increase in our nursing department positions. This would 100% be outside of the proposed operating budget to be able to meet those regulatory needs. There is concern, as I'm sure folks are aware, when we do bring students back into the school building, students, staff, and families, there is going to be a transition element of that where some folks may not be able to transition as smoothly as others, and that could lead to some issues related to school avoidance, which creates problems for the individual student. Additionally, as we do not currently have sort of, as folks have said, eyes on our students, there may be increased reporting of cases of abuse or neglect or drug use, particularly for our older students that will require very specialized care amongst people within a guidance or adjustment counselor role. So in terms of meeting that need, both for students and families, we anticipated that there may be a staffing increase needed in that capacity. In order, if we are, which we believe we will be, at some point next year in some form of remote learning in order to make sure that we have appropriate technology for all of our families, but also supplies and resources for our students to learn at home. There may be a need to have increased supply costs there, whether it be for increased purchasing of Chromebooks so that every student pre-K through 12 or K through 12 at least has access to an individual Chromebook, whether it be supply kits that we put together for math, for example, of math manipulatives or science resources, things of that nature, and certainly paper copies of items to be distributed. So that may require an increase in some capacity. That is possible within the supply resources. That could be depending on the model of instruction that we start off with or we're in for most of the year. It is possible that that could be maintained within the supply budgets we currently have, but because we just don't know, we wanted to identify that there. We did need to make sure that there are planned projects, which there are within both Green Meadow and Fowler for this summer in terms of bathrooms, to ensure that there's appropriate numbers and access to hand washing stations. Additionally, and this goes back to the nursing component, we do need to ensure that there is an area where we can isolate individuals who exhibit symptoms. That will likely require some degree of renovation that had not been planned for, or at least modification, if not renovation of existing spaces. We anticipate, and again, this is possible to be maintained within the current budget lines, but just don't know that there will be increased cleaning protocols that we will have to follow with potential equipment purchases and other things that may fall outside of the planned operating budget of the facilities department. So again, could that be contained within the facilities department and maintenance lines? Yes, we will know more once we know what those industry specific cleaning protocols are. Will be an increase. There is not a potential increase for professional development for faculty and staff. We will need to have increasing levels of professional development for faculty and staff in regards to instructional planning, delivery of remote learning, any number of other pieces, but also in regards to dealing with the social emotional needs of our students. So more trauma-informed professional development, OSHA training for our staff in areas so that they are able to protect themselves and protect the students. There's a variety of trainings that are going to be mandated, both in terms of just simply the operations of opening a building, but then also in terms of meeting the needs of our students, both academically and socially throughout that. Now, again, as with the other items above, it is possible that that may be able to be maintained within the professional development line for the district. I am currently looking at that and working with Adam Steiner, our technology director, on what summer programming may look like for our teachers and to see what we can do in that capacity. But again, being aware of that as a potential cost. And then one of the areas that will be drastically different or likely be drastically different is the ability to provide specialized instructions to meet students' specific student needs. This is something that we will need to identify how to do that differently than we have been doing currently in any number of ways. Even if we do return to school, if there is a student who is medically compromised and is unable to do so because the risk is too large, will we need to provide in-home services, and will that need to be through a contractual agency or things of that nature? So we don't know what that cost may be or where that specific services will go, but it's something that we discussed.
Now, Jennifer, can I ask a question?
I'm sorry, Natasha, 1 second. Mauro had her hand raised.
Oh, sorry, I can't
no,
see
that's okay.
everybody. Sorry.
Jennifer, I just, could you explain a little bit about what the CARE Act money,
Sure.
how much that could go towards some of this stuff, or is it very limited in its scope of what we could use that money for?
No, and Irene can actually probably explain this better. Essentially, we're expecting to receive $139,000-ish, although with the sharing with private schools, some of that will go to the Imago school, so we don't know quite how much. That's a separate issue. But essentially that money is allocated to meet the needs of to respond to the needs of COVID-19 pandemic situation. So can go to any of these things. Because we are a small district and we will only be receiving 139,000, and I know there's been conversation about potentially using a significant portion of that for taking care of lost preschool revenues for this spring and other things. It doesn't cover all of these expenses, but yes, those funds can be used. And what we are desperately trying to do is save as much of that as possible so that we can cover as many of these things with those funds, or with, again, some shifting of operating funds as possible.
Thank you.
Natasha?
So Jennifer, the information that you've outlined here, I know this is assumptions. Most of these assumptions are based on if we are returning to on-site learning, correct?
I think some of them are, but some of them are certainly not.
Like the specialized learning, obviously not that, but
the professional development for our staff, in terms of creating those projects. And that's not just professional development where our staff are participating in a training session. That is also having staff literally creating over the summer a remote learning model that takes what we're doing now and elevates it to a new level in some ways. It may be that those professional development components are actually because instead of having our staff create those remote learning resources, there's a product out there that the staff feels is better and we need to train them on how to use that. So some of those things are going to happen regardless.
for the professional.
The other piece that I think, and this is what's hard, is that when we're talking about what the model looks like in September, that might be very different than what it looks like in November versus January versus May. And there could be a place where we're back hybrid in the fall, where we're all online, we're back hybrid, we're all in the building. So that's the other component that's difficult about this, where we potentially could have multiple models that are taking place. And I hope I'm not scaring people, but this is just
reality.
It's the unknown of what this situation is, and making sure that we're keeping our students and staff as safe as possible while continuing to educate them in the best way possible.
And I had two more questions. One, you talked about the professional development. I know a lot right now, we have a lot of online products that have been free for COVID for the teachers and just the communities. Are those do you anticipate any of those now being charged or starting to be charged in the fall? Because I heard that, basically like, hey, the freebie stuff might then be now an additional lift. How we may or may not be able to accommodate what we are leveraging already or what we are using.
Right. So thankfully, the Maynard Education Foundation, thank you to Mary and Fiona, had already reached out and expressed an interest in working with us both now and in the fall to potentially help with some of those costs. But yes, all of the, these companies are very smart. They got us in using their product with the free version. And there are some of them that we may choose to say, you know what, this really meets a need and cuts down a lot of work for staff, but meets the need for our students. So we're going to go ahead and increase that cost. I'm not saying we're going to do this, but iExcel is one that most folks in the community are familiar with. We have, thanks to Mr. Barth, have free access through all of our buildings for that. If the teacher leaders and the folks on the reopening committees feel that that is something that is an easy go-to, that does provide some quality access for our students, that may be something where we say, you know what, we're going to go ahead and increase our subscriptions in that way.
And in that vein, this, I know that we got a survey today that, the state is now looking to perhaps maybe have something. Again, they're all in the exploration stage at this point, but the state may also be giving us guidance and may have some guidance for us in some programs that interest maybe free for the whole state if they can work on some kind of deals. So
that'd be great.
Also in the work.
That'd be great. And my other question was about on-site. If we're doing some type of, you're talking about screening and needing nurses and having seclusion areas for, to isolate. But what are, and you may have put it here, I didn't see, but if there are staff and students that are high risk,
Mhm.
That part, I was not really clear about that, because would students or staff have to self-identify at some point? I mean, we obviously don't know the history of folks. So
Right.
how is that
So-
conversation
Yep.
evolving?
Yep. So there's a couple things. One of the things, there's a district out in Colorado. I think it's either Boulder Valley or Boulder, Colorado, where we're going to use actually their survey. We want to survey families just to get a sense, and obviously it may be different now than it is in the fall, but just to get a sense from families of what they're thinking about. Are they comfortable sending their student back to school, so that we can plan for those eventualities. Later on in
Right.
the document, you will see that one of the assumptions, I believe in the instructional assumptions, is that we need to plan these models to be as fluid and flexible as possible. Fluid in the sense that we may need to turn on a dime and go from remote to hybrid to face-to-face or what have you, but then also flexible because we know we will have staff that are at risk, and students that are at risk that may not feel that they are able to come into the building. So the way we phrase this is that we really want to consider some flexibility within those models so that we can adjust for that. Jean LaBelle at the high school actually came up with a great idea. Very simple. She said, you just have them put their iPad on the desk and they beam in that way, so they can see it. So I think there's a variety of different options that are there. Some buildings are considering that, for example, the older students will be all online, so that you are able to have small group instruction in some buildings instead of having whole group instruction, so that if you do have someone who's severely compromised, they may be able to still come in and get some form of either direct instruction or things of that nature. But so in terms of where we are, our high level is that we need to consider those flexibilities. The details of that is what we have to work out.
Thank you.
Had a couple of questions if I could.
I'm sorry, Mary Brandley. Lydia had her hand raised, so I'm going to go to her and then
Absolutely,
we'll get to you.
absolutely.
I just had a quick addition when Jen was talking about the extensive professional development training and working on curriculum that we may require the teachers to do. That will probably require some sort of contract negotiations or impact bargaining.
Absolutely.
So that's another expense that we need to be mindful of.
Right. So currently within our contract, we do have language around mandatory professional development or trainings, if you will, where we have 36, there's an hourly rate and we pay folks to come in, and there's certain trainings that we do that with. Regardless though, this is if we are going to say that, either every staff member in the district or a significant number, this is absolutely something we're going to work with the Maynard Education Association on. I do want to give praise to the Maynard Education Association, and please forgive me, this isn't the name of the association, but the Paraprofessionals Association. Anyway.
Educator support. Yeah.
So
Got to get that
both,
down.
yes, both organizations have been incredibly thoughtful, incredibly diligent, and absolutely willing to do what needs to be done, keeping an eye on protecting their membership, but also doing what needs to be done for students and families. So I feel very positive that we're in a really great place to have those conversations with the Maynard Education Association.
All right. Who's got birds?
Oh, sorry, that's me.
Is that you? Okay.
I do too.
Oh, they're cute.
I thought somebody was outside. I was kind of jealous, but all right.
Go out the window.
So my
Mary?
turn? All right.
Yeah.
So the professional development for faculty and staff, I know like with any industry, there are some faculty, some staff that are really, much more comfortable than others. What's the learning curve? How are we going to get everybody in the same playing field to the best of our ability? Because I even hear about it now with some classrooms being much more technology savvy, shall I say? So what is the plan for that? Or
Are you thinking like equity, Mary? Is that what you're?
I'm just afraid that, the same people that are not comfortable with online teaching,
Yep.
we need to get to a point in September with everybody's on at the same level. Everybody's equitable as far as, having the same skills and being comfortable in that. So,
Well, I'm gonna go out on a limb, Mary, and say that we're probably not gonna get everyone to the same level in the same place by the fall, just because the skill sets are so vastly different. If we are in a hybrid or a remote learning piece, what the benefit of that, however, is that we now have the time, which we did not in this spring, have the time to create structures where people can use their strengths in order to do what works well for them. So we can have some training. And I've spoken with Mr. Steiner, or Dr. Steiner, excuse me, about these, specific pieces about some of the components of doing a face-to-face virtual meeting and how we can make folks feel more comfortable, and some of the safety measures we can put in place that address some of the MEA concerns, and doing some of that piece. But I think what's important to note is that we are going to have staff members that are at very different learning curves in this capacity. We will continue to work with them, but we are also looking, which our teams have done over the last, I don't even know how many weeks, looking to use the strengths of the individuals within the teams and within the department so that we can make sure every student has what they need. So that's sort of a short answer to that. I want to make sure that we're using the strengths of our staff, providing them with some basic level of training so that they can feel comfortable, and then be able to create areas for people to really excel for all of our kids.
maybe not having the teachers work so much in silos like they have for years, but to have them work more collaboratively.
100%, and that is exactly what has happened this spring. I think most of the staff would agree that the last, again, I don't know how many weeks this is, 9, that it has been a much more collaborative moment than we've had in the past. And again, thank you to our teachers and our paraprofessionals and all of our educators for being willing to do that work, because gosh, it's not easy. It's not easy when you're in a face-to-face setting, never mind when you've got virtual meetings with adults and then you've got kids and stuff like that. So I feel we're in a good place to move that forward.
Great.
Yeah, I would agree. The teachers have really done a nice job embracing the mess, a lot of this remote learning. And I think additional PD over the summer is going to be very helpful.
Yeah, and it's nothing to take away from them. It's, fear of the unknown. We all have it. We're always afraid of learning something new. So I'm just grateful about that collaboration piece, especially. My question is more of a logistics one. I know that one of the things that we were going to ask for the budget for next year was increased Wi-Fi. Now, if we go back to the schools and we, say, have the hybrid, are we going to be able to do that from the schools to provide the necessary Wi-Fi to reach out to the students that might not be at school on that?
So I think what we were doing is we were just updating the
hubs or whatever.
That's not what they're mean. Yes, the hub. We're doing the server, but then I believe we were also looking at the modes that are in the ceiling. Please forgive me, folks, for not knowing the words of that.
Hives. I think they're called hives, Jennifer.
Routers.
We can check with Adam on that. I think we were just updating it to be more current. So I don't think we were actually increasing bandwidth, but I can check with Adam on that. He has not expressed any concern currently. As long as we move forward, with the 2 projects that we already have in the works.
I think that was scrapped. I think that was a capital project. I think that was considered low priority, right?
We talked about that earlier in the year, and he said he can certainly go another year for that. So I think he'd be okay, but we can definitely check with him on that.
And that was before the COVID, so that's was when the world was blissful.
Yeah.
So Mara, I know you haven't gotten a chance to say something. Would you mind if we let Lydia do her question?
I'm okay.
Okay, go ahead, Lydia.
I just want to mention something Jen said on Monday when we met with FinCom about how this is really an opportunity to take a look at how we educate our kids and how we could be really creating an entirely new educational model. And that people to some degree are going to have to let go of their expectations and their preconceived notions of what formal schooling looks like, because it's probably not going to look like that again for a while, and be comfortable with that. And Jen, I don't know if you want to add anything to it, but I really appreciated that comment on Monday.
I don't remember specifically what I said, but I think probably what I was alluding to is that, you know, we are forced in this capacity to do much more experiential learning, project-based learning. You know, the other thing that this does, if we do it well, is it turns the learning over to students in ways that it's really easy to not do when you have a teacher with the students in the classroom space. So in terms of providing student choice and voice within assignments and things of that nature, which is best practice, you know, a remote or a hybrid model really necessitates that. So I think, you know, I'm not usually the silver lining person in a lot of ways, but educationally, as an education professional, I'm excited about what is possible, and that I'm not excited that we have been put in this position, but I'm excited to see what our team can come up with that's even better than what we've done before.
Yeah.
I read an article today that they said the kids that are in elementary school right now are going to be they're going to blow us all out of the water, because it's going to allow for more individualized learning. So if you've got a kid that is a math genius and they're in 6th grade, there's nothing to prevent them from going to the 11th grade, you know, on their own. So it's actually, it's a whole new awakening for this generation that is coming up.
Yeah, and we have to build the structures around it so that that can happen thoughtfully for all of our students.
Yeah.
But it can happen, and we're doing elements of that. And I'm excited about what's possible.
Natasha?
I just wanted to add that I think in seeing and just hearing feedback in the community and my own experience and hearing, it just really has highlighted how, you know, there's no one model that works for every kid, right? I mean, individualized, sometimes synchronous learning is better for some, and then sometimes asynchronous is also beneficial. And I think that's where, you know, we had to have more emergency learning plans kind of put into place. But as the thought is considered about what will happen in the fall, I think it does allow that opportunity to see how can we, and maybe potentially incorporate, if we are remote, and again, not knowing, or however, some of those mix of that, where it's not one or the other. I mean, I have, you know, a child who is, you know, who's a special education child, and obviously, you know, for her, you know, asynchronous learning is not the best. You know, I know that through the remote environment, many kids have struggled with self-advocacy, you know, because in classrooms, teachers have awareness of if a child is struggling with something where they might be able to intervene. At home, a child is struggling with math, the parent doesn't intuitively know how to really provide those supports. And I think students are have a trouble reaching out remotely asking for help. Like, I need help with this. And I think that's where I would personally like to see some synchronous piece, because then it allows them a natural platform in some way to have visibility with their teacher, where they don't have to feel pressured or anxious that they're disturbing. You know, there's a lot of different pieces, and I appreciate the thought that's going into all these possibilities. But I do, you know, what we're saying now is what we see now today. Even if we were remote in the fall, it's not going to be the same. Is that correct?
Yep. Because we have time to plan it.
Yeah, no, and I want to make sure we frame it that way for the public as well, because I know that's been a concern that we can't continue to do what we're doing now in the fall if we are remote. And so I just want to make sure we're framing it as that we're taking steps. If we are remote, it will be different. How different, we're not sure, but it's not going to be what we're experiencing now.
And
Right,
so if you
Natasha,
look,
we're hoping we get specific directions from the Department of Education, to help us do this. I mean, really, it's been, up to the districts and, there has been some direction from the Department of Ed, but it hasn't been as specific as we would like, and which is making a lot of superintendents and other districts, uneasy because everybody's doing different things. So hopefully, if and when this comes out, we will have specific, and we've been told we're going to have specific, clear guidance on how to proceed.
and in terms of that, if folks look in, I know this is in the instructional assumptions, there is an explicit piece in there that requires increased face-to-face, I think is how we worded it, components. And again, so we know that that is something that we want to increase, whether we are in a hybrid, remote, or in other capacity. How that looks in order to meet the needs that you're identifying is exactly what we have to figure out.
Thank you.
I just wanted to thank everybody for putting this together, the reopening draft, because it's a great first step, and I feel like we're already in a really good place just by bringing up the questions and the potential additions and that kind of thing. So thank you very much. I know this must have been a lot of hard work, as with everything else that's going on right now.
Sure.
Would it be helpful that we could get, so I'm thinking about how do we maintain our awareness without you having to do a 5-page document every time there's an update? What is there like updates, or we can do like an update when you get more guidance and or things that are not possible? I don't know the right way to do it, but from thinking about strategic planning and how we're evolving going forward, I would like to see some type of way that we can, again, kind of look and see what some of the discussions are. And again, it can be more informed for us when we're having conversations, because they do have budget implications, obviously. And so I think having that almost more immediate information was going to be helpful in some capacity. We get closer to town meeting. We have our public hearing next week. So that's sort of the things that I want to anticipate that we might get questions about for next year.
Yeah, so we're meeting again. The building committees meet weekly at least. We are meeting again as a district committee on June 1st, at which point we will see which of these elements, assumptions the buildings tackle to come to either closure on or need more information on. I'm happy to provide continued updates in this form or in any other form that you request. This is an ongoing piece. As Mary Jane has indicated previously, we initially heard we would get industry-specific guidance for June 1st from the state. We are now anticipating industry-specific guidance from other folks who have said it will be June 30th. So this is going to be an ongoing, living, nebulous document for some time. So I'm happy to provide you with the updates of the conversations, and when we do nail anything down, go from there.
Thank you.
So, Jennifer, I'm just scrolling through this so that everyone can see the different domains in which you're making assumptions and considering what may, at this moment in time, based on the information we have literally today, as of today, what may be happening, so people can see the extent to which considered the scenarios and projected out. I want to just ask you, what do you feel in order for our district, for us to be ready for September? What do you feel is like the highest priority for getting in there, and of the items that you felt like were going to need to be considered?
Getting into the buildings, or?
No, I'm sorry. I didn't say that.
No. And that's why I wanted to clarify.
Yeah, not getting into the building,
yeah.
getting into
The year.
all students, they're there for all students to be learning in September as best we can under the circumstances. What is that from your perspective? What do we need to make sure happens if it turns out we need it?
I think extensive professional development is really where we're going to have to focus our efforts on. But to be honest with you, it depends, and Jennifer keeps saying this, it depends on what guidance we're giving. Are we going to have a hybrid model? Are we going to have a remote model? You know, it's very dependent on what it is, but ultimately it's professional development, I think. Jennifer, what do you think?
I agree. And so because we don't know, I think it's, I don't have a crystal ball, so I don't want to pretend that I do.
But we'll need professional development either way, right? Whether we're on-site or remote or hybrid, right? So that is one that falls into any category, correct?
Right. But so more to the point, to get to Beth Lynn's kind of question, I believe pretty strongly that we're going to get very specific regulations around cleaning protocols, around isolation, around entrance into buildings, you know, what symptoms we have to screen for. I believe that we will get very explicit guidance from the Department of Public Health and from the state on those, that we will then create our protocols to be able to implement. I don't think that's going to be a nebulous piece where Maynard's going to figure out, okay, well, if we scan your temperature and you're at 99, we're sending you home, and
Right.
Sudbury's doing some other temperature or things like that. I do think that we will get some guidance from the state on remote learning. I fear, however, that guidance will come at a time where if we wait for it, which is why we're not, that we will not be able to create the systems that we need. And so the work that I think, we know how to teach in a face-to-face situation. We know what that looks like. The work that really needs to be done, and we need a significant team in to do that over the summer with our teachers, with our principals of curriculum instruction and assessment, are going to create, what does that hybrid model look like, and what is that face-to-face what is that all remote model look like, so that we can address some of the pieces that you see here in terms of these instructional and social emotional assumptions. Those are the two models that we don't have built out in as a structured way as we need to. And again, I think what is likely is that we will be shifting between models next year, depending on the public health data. So we need the teams in to say, okay, you know, what does this hybrid model look like? What does it mean if on Monday we have to go remote exclusively? And that's going to take, yes, again, it's professional development, it's training, but it's also times for our teams to have those conversations, to figure out what those logistics look like, our teacher teams. And again, I do want to just be very clear. Any of this requires us to negotiate and work with the Maynard Education Association on what we are going to be asking of their membership. And so I'm not presuming any sort of summer work or summer pieces that we have not negotiated with them. You know, so just to put that out there.
And this doesn't include transportation either, right? Because we don't, I just want to.
It does not include transportation. Irene can talk a little. She created a bunch of scenarios. What I have been operating under the assumption of is that if we need to reduce the amount of students on buses by half, we're reducing the number of students in school by half. But Irene, do you want to talk about sort of what you guys are looking at in the business office regarding busing?
Yeah, so what I did, and Colleen needed some of this in order to send out, you know, the notices to people, finding out who would even be interested in getting on a bus if we come back, was I assume that at a minimum, the state is going to say 2 kids per bench, which means you can get 52 kids on a bus. Most of our buses for Green Meadow, and especially Fowler, have several of the rows with 3 kids to a bench. So we don't have 52 kids on a bus. We've got 60, 65, and 70. Now the high school is a whole nother matter. There's plenty of social distancing on the high school buses. If the state was getting very drastic and saying 26 kids per bus, that's a whole nother scenario. So I can run, you know, numbers from here till tomorrow, but basically we would have to decide at what point do we want to say, you know what, we're only going to give busing to the kids that live 2+ miles away, because they're the ones that legally we have to. You know, so there's again, you know, I can tell you what the costs are to do any number of things. But for now, we're going to work on the assumption that we are only going to be able to put 52 students per bus. And then we're just going to go from there and see what happens.
And then the other component in regards to that, right? So for example, let's presume that we had enough space in our classrooms to keep students 6 feet apart and have the entirety of Maynard Public Schools within the 3 buildings. I don't think we can do that in any capacity. But let's presume that that was the situation. If we needed to do, or we did double sessions, we would need to do double bus runs, then you're increasing your cost by 2. And so because those are so prohibitive, we have really looked at, if we're going to need to have fewer students on the bus, we're going to need to have some sort of alternate schedule. And again, what that looks like, we don't know.
Yeah.
But we're trying to mitigate where we can increase costs.
Yeah, so we've looked at the numbers, and whatever comes up, very quickly, we can tell you what that will probably, but again, there's no guarantees, what that will probably look like.
Okay.
And
So
again, some of it could be coming down to making decisions.
I
So
had a-
Natasha had her hand raised, and then Mary, you're next. And just so everyone's aware, we have about 4 more minutes for this agenda item. We can choose to go over, but I just wanted to give you a sense of time.
So with, so to kind of pivot the conversation a little bit, we have Green Meadow potentially opening late. And considering that some of the roof of the kindergarten wing might be getting done around that time, how are we considering that if that area is not, if that wing is still offline completely in September and October?
So I don't think that would impact our planning because it doesn't impact our expected number of classroom sections. And again, if we need to, I don't think that we can physically, even with those spaces, physically fit the entirety of the Green Meadow population within that building 6 feet apart, or 7, or however many feet, including pushing the chairs out and such. But that is something that the teams are looking at. They're literally taking the measurements of each classroom to say, if we have to have desks this far apart, how many kids can fit in this space? So given that, I don't think that having that wing closed for a portion of the year is going to have really any impact either way.
I'm just thinking about, like, if for scenario planning, as you're talking about, like, measuring desks and stuff and thinking about capacity, if it might be better to assume that area will be closed.
Oh, I
And
think
then-
we are. Yeah.
Okay,
I think,
okay.
Yeah, I think we're operating under the assumption we have the classrooms that we have now.
Okay, and so if that's closed, and then it would be a bonus if we get more space,
Exactly.
but, okay, got it. Thank you.
Mary?
So I had a comment and a question, I guess. I was under the impression that we only bus students from 2 miles and further anyway. We had done that a long time ago.
We-
changed that
We
policy.
don't charge them. In other words, the kids that are 2+ miles ride the bus for free.
Right.
The other students have to pay a bus fee in order to get on the bus.
All right, that's where I was going with that. Okay,
Yeah.
I just wanted to make sure we still had the
Right.
same policy. And Irene, just a question for you. So I know that we've had some loss of revenue, but you've been also working really hard to renegotiate with the places that we can. Are we looking at having any extra money at going into next year that we could use for the summer professional development in that, or are we really?
No, we're going to be because of the losses in the preschool. We're going to be on the tight side.
Okay. All right.
Okay, I will let you know if that changes, but we're kind of balancing out. The good news is we're not going to have a huge hole.
Right.
But I wish I could tell you that, oh yeah, we're gonna be swimming in some extra
Yeah,
cash.
Yeah, please let us know when you find that money tree. I'll be
Yeah,
eager to
I'm
hear about it.
working
I
on
was
it.
hoping we might have a little bit to roll in.
That's not what got planted, a money tree, right, Bethlyn, the other day?
Oh, I wish.
Okay, all right, darn.
Real quick, I had been hoping, I've mentioned this in the past, we were hoping to get the state to relent a little bit on the out-of-district tuitions. And, several districts have sent letters, and I think they're still sending them to say, hey, guys, come on. You got to take a look at this and give us a break. You can't be telling us we have to pay 100%. And guess what they did? They came back and told us, oh, no, you have to pay 100%. And I'm gonna stop there, because if I get going, I'll be ranting. I was seeing red when I read their letter. We're still working on that. We're not expecting a huge reduction. We may end up with no reduction, but we're all here scraping for every penny. and
Yeah.
looking at having to, furlough people or have, wage freezes. And I am having trouble stomaching that these schools get to say, nope, we're made whole. We're
Yeah.
kept whole. We get 100%. I'm not buying it. So we're gonna continue fighting that fight, but I can't make any promises because that's a huge chunk of change for us. Even a 10% reduction, that would be 10 or $20,000 or more. So I'm still fighting, guys. I'm still fighting.
Yeah, she was not happy with that email today. I can tell you that.
Well, thank you. Part of this agenda item was also consideration of the principal's scope of work. And currently the way that the recommendation is for next year is that we're going to be ensuring that all the leadership and operations principals as part of the dual principal model are at 215 days in their contract. And then the curriculum, instruction, and assessment principles at 260 days. So we would align that. We, of course, at this point, as part of cost-saving measures, would not have that. We'd end up, as the recommendation is right now, Jennifer would be providing some support to Green Meadow, and they would just have their curriculum and instruction and assessment principal. And those principals are at the ones at 260 days. So, so that's something that we wanted to make sure to talk about. We've obviously gotten a lot of feedback from the community on that. I know that I've shared every single email. Some of them just come to the chair. So we've shared every single one out to every member that has been received, had a conversation, had some public comments at the last meeting as well. So I wanted to bring that up to be able to consider that in the context of this conversation and see what people are thinking.
So I think if I have my numbers correct, the difference between 215 days and 260 days is 11-month schedule versus of the operations and leadership versus the 12-month for curriculum assessment, right? Is that sort of?
That's
think
about,
so.
right. I think it's 220 makes it 11 months. So
Okay.
Yeah, so it's 11 months minus 5 days.
Okay, all right. So just so that we know,
Essentially,
yeah. So
for the
basically-
215 days.
Right, okay, all right. Thank you.
Yep. Natasha?
And one of the things I wanted to, I know this obviously is very important about having folks feeling that we have preparation or in place to what we're going to have in the fall. I think what we're seeing and what we've been hearing and discussing is that we don't know what the fall is going to look like yet. And so it's really hard to make concrete decisions on changing staffing at any level because we have yet to get awareness on what that will look like. But I think to Bethlyn's point, we would be, encourage the administration to revisit if needed when data indicates that our operational needs for the fall will be prescribed in a specific way. And I know that's a hard thing to hear and to process, but I think we're having discussions about the budget at every meeting. And so I anticipate that as things shift, I would hope that, and Jennifer and Mary Jane have done a great job in presenting this information tonight. This was very helpful. It was very great to hear that conversations about the vision for the high school or all schools will be different into what's happening now. I know that's, that it's not going to be just the asynchronous type of learning if we are in the fall. So I think that's great to highlight. And just that, we're all asking tough questions. And so I just respect every member of the community and our committee and our administration for really trying to think of all the scenarios of how we can better position ourselves. And a lot of work, a lot of hours are going into this. And I just, just appreciate the effort. So thank you.
I'd like to encourage, if at all possible, for our operations and leadership principals, if we could ask them if they could do more of their summer work, because I know they work through the summer, if we could encourage them in some way to do more of it toward the August timeframe, because I do feel that come the middle of the summer, we're going to have a better understanding of what the buildings have to look like physically, as well as the curriculum side of it. So I'd like to ask that if we could.
I think that's a reasonable request. Because
So
that's
Mary-
probably not going to get the information much before the end of June. That's what they say. So who knows? It might be even longer, depending on, you know, how these 3-week shutdowns go, or these 3 weeks reopenings go.
Mary, I just wanted to clarify what you're saying. So you're saying, so those, if we, in leaving things as currently recommended, that we have those per the principal model at 2 and 15 days, that they would end up working, picking days that they're working, that they have that start earlier in the, like that's in August, that they load in August with working days. Yeah, okay.
I know right now they do work through the summer, but if we could, you know, ask that it happen more in the August timeframe, just so that we are, I'd love to see us be as over prepared as we can be, not knowing what we're going into, but yeah. So.
Yeah.
It is worth mentioning that, I mean, we're going to vote on a budget, the town, in June, and then we potentially might need to revisit this again in October. So, so a lot of different, what we know now is clearly could totally be different, and which is frustrating, but understandable.
Lydia?
I would just like to add that we have the additional complication of the water and sewer issues that are ongoing. And if the DEP does choose to close Old Marlboro down, that could be a whole nother thing that we need to take into account, because if we don't have enough water or proper sewage treatment, then we may not be able to go back to school at all. And I'm just putting that out there as something, it's preliminary consideration.
Just another element, another wonderful element to factor into the bigger picture.
Out of curiosity, how much water, do we know what the water usage of the school is? And the reason I'm asking is not that it's not something we need to be concerned with, but I can immediately think of a couple of scenarios, and I know so many people that have been in districts that have dealt with various things over the years. And I'll be honest, my initial thought was our needs could probably be met with tankers, because the schools only need water for toilets and hand washing, and and the kitchen. We're not going to do, we can live without showers. Okay, I know that might make gym's going to be dicey anyways. In sports, you can always tell the kids after practice, go shower at home. But we don't have washing machines going. You know what I'm saying? We're not an industrial user. So that's my first thought. The second thought, of course, is that then we're just going to have to find another building. That's what you do when something like this happens. And again,
Coolidge is great.
2 districts that had fires, and they had to scramble and find other facilities. You don't get just to say, well, gee, we're shut down until whenever. That's not an option.
But the water wouldn't be specific to just the building. It would be a town-wide issue.
Oh, right. But I'm just saying they'll be dealing with that. In the meantime, we can keep our buildings open. The longer range concern, which I don't know what, if anything, we can do about, and Lydia, I think this is where you were going, is, oh my God, what happens to our budget?
Lydia, can you share, I'm looking at the folder, the virtual meeting, and I can't open that folder that.
Yeah, it said access denied. I ran into that as well.
Oh, really?
Yeah,
Okay.
so I guess what I want to double check, because I remember this was brought up at a Board of Selectmen meeting last week. Justin DeMarco had indicated they need to hire some staffing because, again, it was a statement, or the state was coming down pretty harshly. So I wanted to see if that was just a letter that reinforced what that was. And basically, from my understanding, was they're trying to avoid being put on a plan. So they're needing to make incremental changes to their man-hour structure and man-force. Is that what the letter was about?
It wasn't just that. I mean, I'm going to paraphrase, but what he basically said at the meeting was he got a 3-hour tongue lashing from the DEP, and they're quite unhappy with Maynard right
Yeah,
now.
that was, yeah, I think okay, all right. So it was about the conversation he had then with, okay, all right. Thank you. I just wasn't sure if it was something different.
But he did receive an action plan, and that's in the folder. So I am going to try and figure out how to share this, because
Right.
obviously I don't know how.
And basically, from a townwide perspective, from what, and this was just last week, so it could have changed. They needed to add staffing, which were unanticipated, to the DPW.
The other thing too is that apparently we are drawing more water in some of our wells than we have permits to do. And because of the development on the Sudbury line, on the Sudbury side, there's a lot of runoff now into the surface water, part of which is the over fertilization of the yards and lawns of the developments over there. And the fertilization is getting into the surface water, which is then being drawn into our water table because we're taking and pumping so much water from our water table. So that's where the contaminants are coming in, and our pumps are not, or our purification stations, or whatever they're called, I don't know the technology or the terminology, are not equipped to deal with those contaminants.
Oh, I do want to, I think that was a very important contextualizing factor. That is, I'm sure we'll end up talking in more detail about this at some ensuing meetings. So I don't want to get too much into that now, and just return us back to tying up the agenda item. I know I wanted to just return to, there are some considerations in relation to, for this coming year, recognizing that, so from my understanding and from every conversation I've been in, just to say this is my 5th year, the dual principal model, when it was instituted, was always meant to be at this 260 days and then at the 215 days. And apparently that was the structure previously as well, when they had a principal and a vice principal. And that was part of how you got to financial solvency, where there was no there was not a lot of net difference by moving to this 2 principal model. So that's been my understanding, and I don't know, Jennifer, if you want to correct me if that's wrong as far as how I explain that.
No, that
Okay.
the administrative structure was a 215 and 260.
Okay, yeah. And there's been particular reasons, as I understand it, why we have not been able to consider and ensure that that was implemented across the district. And at this point, I think that notwithstanding what people in these positions are offering for leadership, that there's so much coming down the pike in terms of budget. I feel like we need to find certain guidance and principles that we hold on to, as far as the models that are actually like really evidence-informed models from other districts as well. And that is one that I think that is one of the reasons why I feel like we have people that in order to make sure that we're adhering to that fiscal responsibility in terms of the positions. So then consideration of that for this coming year, for me, I have to say, it's been all over my head. As I've taken everything in and people's considerations and concerns for this year ahead, and I have the same anxieties, but so there were 2 things that were very clarifying and helpful for me. One was seeing what's Jennifer laid out and recognizing that there are these reopening committees and the amount of work that's going into that, and recognizing what you just said, Jennifer, that that's really going to be that the bulk of that work ends up being around teachers and bringing those teams together to be able to figure out what curriculum is going to look like and doing the training and support to be able to implement, right? And then, so that for me, decreases the necessity to say we need to, even for just this year, keep the position higher. And then those leadership and instruction positions at a higher number of days. And then the other piece is that 215 days, I think I know it's been framed as 10 months, and it turns out it's actually more than 10 months. So that also, I mean, it's 11 months minus 5 days. So, but that's, and in consideration of like how this plays out and what we're doing, that's a decent amount of time, and understanding that we could encourage that those positions are loading into August with some of those work days to help us be ready in September. All those things, in addition to the expanse of financing considerations we have moving forward, and budget considerations for potential extraordinary expenses not considered in FY21 based on what we will need to do to be ready for COVID. I am feeling the need to continue as recommended with leaving these at 215 and 260. So I just wanted to state that, because that's, I think, an important thing to share out, and understanding that I've read and thoroughly considered what everyone's been saying, and the points that the community has been making around this too.
I think you're correct, Bethlyn. I appreciate how you framed it. I know this is not a tough, this is a very tough place to be, because we are all living in a world of unknown. And so when you are that way, you gravitate to the reassurances and the comforts of what you have in your immediate circle. And for many, this is what we've heard a lot about. And so that's natural. It's, you want that. But I think that what we need to also be mindful of is how are we factoring into the broader picture of all the needs. And there's so many needs right now, and decisions can't be made in a silo on one thing alone. There's so many considerations that I think it's beholden to the school committee to remain informed on these pieces, to educate each other, get information from the administration, which we are asking questions on that. And also, if the conversation needs to shift, that we also are able to do that. So that's not, we have committed to, if there's budget considerations that need to be shifted, of course we need to know like where we're going to pay for it. I mean, but besides that, the health and safety of all the students and staff are our utmost consideration. And it's not a clear picture. And that's what makes it very scary right now, is that we don't have a lot of concrete information to really develop firm plans on. But I think we're doing the best we can with the information we have at this point.
Anyone else?
I also agree with Bethlyn. I came into tonight's meeting wanting more information about what the plans were, how the plans were shaping up for this summer, looking into next year. And I think Jennifer did a great job in letting us know what our potential extra budget costs are going to be this coming year. Mm-hmm. And it definitely helped me figuring out, where the planning was happening, the teachers and the CIA principals and nursing and guidance and all of that, where those are kind of coming, where that planning is coming from. It also was very helpful to hear that the 10-month positions aren't really 10-month, that they're more closer to 11-month for 215. And I agree with Mary that if we could have the majority of that time frame start on August to help out with the planning, that would be great. But with all the budget issues that our town and school system is dealing with right now, it's hard to say, hey, let's change what the model has always been and should have been throughout this time. It's hard to say, hey, let's change that, considering all the changes that are expected to come starting this fall. So it's unfortunate that we can't just say, hey, let's give everybody all that they want. Wish we could do that for all, for everything, that we could just afford to do all the things that we want. But it's just we're not able to do that. So.
I just want to add one more thing. I'm going to just be really clear. I just think about how I'm going to say it. So we're beholden to not only the school community's money, but the taxpayers' money of this town. And it's really tough in this role to weigh all of that. This is not intuitive stuff for any of us. And I hear the feedback that's been shared, and I appreciate all the community has been sharing feedback to keep me honest and keep me in a place that I feel grounded in what I'm hearing. But we are residents of this town, just like every one of you. And so it's just really uncomfortable when people feel that our intentions are not aligned to the best interest of the school that we spend hours trying to do. And for me personally, I had a lot of trouble for people accusing any one of us for matters that were not true. And so I don't want to go into too deep of it, but these decisions are made with consideration of a lot of things, but they're not anyway politically motivated and anything beyond what we feel is right for our community. And I will just leave it at that. So thank you.
Thank you, Natasha.
Well said, Natasha. You want to say something, Lydia, or do you want me to go next?
No, you go. I just wanted to thank Natasha for saying that.
Yeah, that was really well said. I came into this meeting thinking a little bit differently than we had some really serious conversation during our executive session, and knowing that we've put so much work into the two principal model with the 12 months and the 10 months, and finding out that actually the 215 days is closer to 11 months. I'm feeling that going into next year, this is still a really great model. And I'm really, if we can really push toward having the 11-month principle, using August, because I'm feeling like we have two pieces of the puzzle that we have to really work the best that we possibly can for all of our students. The first being obviously the curriculum. And everybody is really already on board with that and doing a great job of helping us get prepared as much as we can. But the other piece is actually the orchestrating of the building. And there are so many pieces that we don't even really know what that's going to encompass. So to have both of those pieces coming together is the best way that we can have the safest and the healthiest environment for our student population and our staff, for everyone that's associated with the school system. So I'm feeling much better about that scenario of moving forward. So appreciate everybody's effort.
I would also like to add that during the executive session, I think one of the things that was brought up that I had completely forgotten about was the fact that we're going to have a facilities director. Also a game changer.
Hopefully.
Yeah, right. Yeah.
Oh gosh, I'm sorry. I'll trade in my kid for that. I mean, I will. I mean, she won't know it, but I'm not going to tell her. Anyway. Yes, that is something I'm firmly committed. I know Mauro and I and Jennifer and Mary Jane, we've all spent many hours working on that. And so that is on the horizon. And thank you for highlighting that. Because that is an important piece that we are bringing in a facilities director, which is something back to this, which will be important also for all of these pieces. So thank you.
I just want to thank everyone. I know this isn't, I am keenly aware that this is not, that there are many different opinions on this matter. And I too, and just trying to consider how to move forward with that and needing to do that. And these are extremely difficult decisions, and we appreciate it matters to hear what the community's feelings on that. And I hope that people know that everything is being heard and considered, and we hope to continue doing that the best we can moving forward as well. So we thank you, and I think unless there's anything else people want to say about this,
next week we'll talk again next week.
we'll be every week. We're having budget update on the agenda. So we'll continue to talk further, and anything else. I'm sorry. Next week is the budget public hearing, moving into the regular meeting. And our next set of items, we'll talk a little bit more about that as well. But next item. And I just want to thank everyone, the leadership team, and everyone that's been involved in trying to really consider. It's been continues to be very intense, and I'm still just grateful to be a part of this community and be able to try to help us through what we're trying to do. And we're very vibrant, and we always will be, and we're all very passionate and care deeply, and I'm grateful for that. And that's not just here in this committee, that's everyone. Clearly we have people attending and listening, and I just am so appreciative for the community. So I'm going to move into the next item, which is our public comments policy review. And in relation to that, I also just wanted to make sure, and you have an update on some pending policies that you wanted to mention, Lydia. So I think what we're going to do, I'm hoping that we can talk specifically about the public comment one. And then I do want to just give, before we close, an update on a related note around the budget public hearing. And then if you want to tell us what we can look forward to, is we won't necessarily talk it through, but just what we can look forward to, because this is just a special meeting. So when we get back to our next regular meeting, we could definitely review some more policies as well.
Sure. So we're going to do BEDH, public comment at school committee meetings, and BEDH/E, guidelines for public comments. Those are the ones we're going to discuss in depth tonight. Do you want me to do updates and a brief on the others after we discuss those?
Yeah, why don't we do those, and then just if literally you want to say these are the ones we're going to talk about next, and if there's something that we can do in follow-up that you could provide via email ahead of our next meeting for us to then consider. I don't know if that makes sense for you. Again, like special meetings.
As long as people
go ahead.
As long as there's no conversation, like I'll send the policies out, and then people can prepare their notes and their feedback for the next meeting. Yeah.
Right. So there's no deliberation. Yeah. And it's just consideration of this being a special meeting. We really focus and hone in on only the most pressing items, and then move back into a regular meeting structure next time.
Yeah.
Okay. Thanks.
So has everyone had an opportunity to read BEDH and BEDHE?
Yes.
All right. So this is the policy that MASC put forward after the ruling in Natick. And I think the only question we had was on BEDH, number 6.
So and we're talking about in the context of not remote meetings, right? I mean, because I think there's two different issues. There's one, our regular, when we're back in the building kind of meetings, and then there's two, ironing out our public comments for remote, which is still, I think we need to do that by Tuesday, Bethlyn, so we can have a separate page to post with the agenda, because Monday is the holiday.
Natasha?
Yeah.
So in our budget subcommittee, policy subcommittee meeting, what we discussed is that these are the policies, and then we would come up with separate procedures for virtual or in-person meetings. That the guidelines would be the same for each venue, but the procedures might be different.
So sign up instructions, explain to me an example of what that means then.
What it means is that if we follow this, if we adopt this and follow this, it means that comments will need to be submitted ahead of time, and will have to pertain to either only agenda items or pre-approved subjects.
Sign up instructions. I'm not sure the right wording, but I'm just having difficulty with understanding how we would incorporate that in our process of it. Bethlyn, I don't know if you.
I also don't really understand. Is that like, if we're talking about like just a regular meeting, would somebody have to come up and sign a piece of paper, and that's the only way that they would be able to comment?
Like in the Board of Selectmen, they have a list or a sign-in sheet, and you write your name, what you're representing, and I think sometimes the topic, or I'm not sure, but then before citizens' comments, they take that paper, and then if you haven't signed up, unless the chair acknowledges you and allows you to speak, only those who have signed up on the sign-in sheet are allowed to speak.
Okay.
And it's partially, I think, a means of documenting who spoke, because not everyone always gives their name and what their perspective is, or who they're representing, and so it's a way to, I think, be more diligent in minutes.
So that's what number 2 though is. A speaker must state their name and their town. I wonder if we instead, I don't know, I just have trouble. It feels like from where we are right now, a really hard pendulum swing into a very opposite direction, and I don't want it to feel like we're trying to limit public comments and making it so difficult for, Maynard is not like a big town, but where I would envision this would certainly be like in larger districts, a definite need. We don't have always a lot of people signing up, and I don't want someone to leverage, oh, well, if we had 2 people at one of our meetings because they didn't sign a piece of paper, we're not going to allow them to speak.
I think part of what this is also the point, the reason why MASC is promoting this is because it gives us a little more of a handle on preventing possible defamation and incendiary or antagonistic comments.
How does that, I'm not sure that I follow how
that sign up would.
So I think, so just to, I'm not sure the best thing for us at this is a good discuss. This is why I wanted to have the discussion. But I think the intent of that was that someone comes in and they have something that they know they want to speak to, as opposed to what you end up having is if someone's going to get up and they're going to be, and they're responding to a comment, to something else, to this, to that, so that it can get, it provides a little more structure to the comments that are happening within the context of the meeting. So I think that that's why they do it, because then it's like, all right, someone came in, they knew they had a comment, or they know moving into the public comment period, they had something they wanted to make sure to share, and then otherwise it's a lot more reactionary and as far as how it plays out, if that makes sense.
So would we envision like this sign up sheet would then, so people come into our meetings at all different times, right? And so right now our public comments we have one, not in remote because we have different circumstances, but
Yeah, right.
typically we have one in the beginning and one in the end. So I'm trying to marry this piece and how that would play out in operational. Would somebody be monitoring the paper and then bringing it to us in the beginning and then bringing it to us in the afternoon, or the later one? And
So this would change that, first of all, so we'd only have one comment period, which is
one.
okay.
This is just starting from the mass guidelines.
Right.
And that would then shift our procedures. So if we adopted this, you would have one public comment period as they do, and you can choose to move that around. You could also choose to, for special circumstances, you could choose to have a second. That doesn't preclude us from being able to do that, and if we felt like we needed to be responsive to something for the community, and we certainly, the point of this is not to, like you're saying, is not to, yes, shut people down, but to provide structure for it. So
and appropriate channels. Appropriate channels. And if someone were there and was reacting to something and felt the need to say something, they could then send us an email and either ask us to put it on a future agenda or ask us to read that email at a future meeting. And it could still become part of the record.
Would we be opposed to adding a sentence after that, or expanding on that to say, or if recognized by the chair?
I think that puts undue pressure on the chair.
Well, I mean, it'd be at the chair's discretion. So, I mean, I think what I'm trying to do is...
You could get accused of discrimination. Like, oh, well, she doesn't like me. That's why she wouldn't let me speak.
No, I mean, I don't think that's discrimination is not, I would say no.
No, I mean, if someone were to get up and speak and the chair said, you know what, we're not going to take any additional comments. Then
you have to be, the meeting, you have to be recognized by the chair, even in public comments. The comments are directed to the chair.
I understand that, but what you're saying is that at the chair's discretion, she could allow other people. Are you saying this in addition to the sign up?
Yeah, like saying to add on, like, so have the sign up, but like I want to allow flexibility that if there is a topic and say a teacher is there or somebody who has expertise and who wants to give comment, who maybe came up later and didn't sign up, that we have the ability to, without breaching our own policy, that we would recognize that. Is that you? Is that something that we could, I don't know, do or incorporate?
Yeah, so I think it is tricky to me. I've already kind of felt that dynamic already where we've had, now that we've moved to remote, we've had some very long comments that are like distinctly much longer than what we tried to put as a guideline for 3 minutes. But when you're reading that, like I hadn't thought about that. And literally in the meeting, I'm thinking like, oh, we're going longer, but I don't feel like I should cut this off because I don't want it to appear as if I'm trying to cut off a person and I didn't cut off any others and we hadn't had a thoughtful strategy. And so you want it to be equitable and fair. And I guess that's part of the issue is that if you let one person speak and not another, then that other person can be like, well, it's because you don't like me. And it's tricky to be able to make that decision in the moment. It's just hard.
Yeah, no, I hear you. I don't
know the answer, but that's the consideration that I think from sitting in this like role that's what happens.
And the other thing too is in the second paragraph, no, third paragraph, public comment is not a discussion, debate, or dialogue between individuals and the school committee. It is an individual's opportunity to express an opinion on issues within the school committee's authority. So I feel like a lot of this, it puts a lot of pressure on us to get our agendas up in a more timely manner, to include all of the documents that we were going to be discussing at a meeting so that the public can review them. I mean, this puts the onus on us to do our work ahead of time so that people aren't reacting in the meeting, so that they can come fully prepared and know what they're going to say and feel as though they've been heard, rather than just learning it on the spot and then being like, what? Nobody ever told us that before. That's, foolishness. So
Well, they're not foolishness, but that's a feeling. That's the circle that kind of happens. It's not like a foolish reaction. It's just, it happens.
oh, right. No. Like
Yeah.
they're saying that's foolishness. Like
okay.
what was just discussed is foolishness.
Yeah. Got it.
I love how you think that people think foolishness is what's going on in people's minds, because I think that's funny. That's not the word that people hear.
That's the thing. I was trying to.
I know. I appreciate the G-rated version for our audience.
Okay. So I understand where you're coming from. This is a drastic diversion from what we've done in the past, but I think we haven't had an effective policy in the past, and it's part of the reason why our meetings end up going so long. And it's also why we get derailed. And if we're gonna start creating,
I don't think it's public comments that we get derailed. I think it's our own discussions primarily.
Well, there's that
to be
too.
honest.
Yeah.
Because I think the public comments, aside from the content of what it is, last week was a little bit longer, but beyond that, typically they haven't been as long as that. We've, the community has been responsive in a way, but I think you get those heated pieces that, obviously people are passionate about and want to advocate for. I just want to make sure that we are comfortable, and I think this is what I want to make sure, that we are comfortable in a very broad change in our current loosey-goosey manner. And I think we are. I think it's needed. So I don't want to come across as not saying I don't want it. I just want to make sure we understand that we need to be able to prepare the audience and support this policy in a way that it's not just words on a paper. It's that we stand by it. We are, enforcing it. That's for everybody, so there is no, subjective view, or if there's one topic, we're going to enforce it for this day. I think that's where credibility to the school committee, where this is needed. So it takes that away. But I just want to make sure then it does put the onus on us to make sure we're consistent in its application.
Right. And I think to that end, what we could do is adopt it, but then not enact it until possibly July 1st, so that we have time to put those parameters in place in order to make sure that we have the agendas done on time and we are uploading the documents so people can review them.
Yeah, and I think also we need I know there's a policy about the agenda. That also needs to be, like the agenda format.
Yep.
I think that also needs to be reviewed as well, if that's what we're tying it to. Which I think it needed to be reviewed anyway, based on with the town clerk. I think it's just a lot of pieces about
that. There's another policy that's related to these, and I can't remember if it's EED.
I appreciate you guys' work on this, and again, I think it is needed. I certainly don't want anyone, Bethlehem, to feel that they are in a compromising position, because you don't want to. It's tough. You're right. It is totally tough. And if this helps us function better as a board, and also supports the community, then I think it is a necessary step.
Also, if we're also being consistent with the selectmen too, then that's not a bad, that's actually a good thing. And so we would put these parameters on the back of the agendas now, correct? Just like we've got the one that we have now, so that people would start to have an understanding about it.
Yeah, and we would also, I think we should post it on our district Facebook page, our district website, just to get the word out there so that people, you know, don't feel as though it was a sneak attack sort of thing. Like,
Yeah, I mean, it's education. We need to do a good job educating people that, look, it's a procedural. We're trying to get better at our role. We're trying to help the community get better, communicating with us, because that's essentially what it is. And it's hard when we have ad hoc comments that we are just, you know, none of us are lawyers that I know of. And a lot of it can get very legally uncomfortable, and you know, how much is too much, how much is not enough. And I think that it does provide us better cover on how we can stay within our role in a effective way.
So
Lydia, I had a question about number 5. There's that line before the school committee. Is that supposed to say Maynard or?
yes.
I think so. Yeah.
Yes, it is. These are the general policies on the MASC website where you then tailor it, customize it to your, or personalize it to your town or district.
So we're not thinking we need a personalized. This is just a cookie cutter version we could just be adopting, right?
Yes, correct. If we want to include the sign up instructions, otherwise that would require an edit, and it might require a review with legal just to make sure that it doesn't compromise any of the other aspects in MASC policies that are cross-referenced.
Yeah, and so just for context, I think you all are aware of this, but we referenced the Natick case. This guidance came out from MASC after a case in which the Natick School Committee was accused of that there were legal concerns around the way they were handling their public comment period, and the way and it ended up falling they ended up coming out and saying, yes, you mishandled this. And so with that in mind, MASC came up with this guidance. So it is different than what we've done before. And I guess that's part of why I feel like it is a little bit of a pivot, and it feels funny in Maynard to have such structure, but I feel like while we also want to make sure that people are heard, we want to make sure that we're finding the places and spaces that they are being heard, and that we're doing that effectively for us in the context of the public meeting. But then also saying, you can email us. Here's making sure that not only that our agenda is clear and in line ahead of time in the materials, so people have comments on what is within the purview of the school committee, but for those things that aren't, that we're sure that people know how to navigate to where they need to go next in relation to that, and that they're able to do that. And I'm sure that people feel like they have that, and that they're there at the microphone at the school committee meeting for a reason. And I don't want to negate or invalidate that in any way. But I think having all those pieces in place then helps me feel like, all right, well, if we need to have this structure, I don't want to feel like it compromises people's ability to be able to contribute. And instead, it actually supports doing that in a way that's constructive, and still allows people to express what they need to express for their consideration in the larger picture of any given issue. I said that was a lot of talking, sorry. It's just important to me because I think it does feel like it's
important. It's important
yeah.
stuff that we need to, I think it's long overdue anyway. I know most school committees have amended their policy last year, and we had, Green Meadow. So clearly this fell low in the priority, but I think it would be neglectful not to address it at this point going forward. But also with the caveat that we still need to have interim with relation, we need to enhance that process a little bit more for how we're doing with remote meetings and clarifying that maybe a little bit more on the agenda on public comments.
Yeah, so I think that, so there are two things I was hoping related to this that we could talk about. So are there any other thoughts about the policy specifically, BEDH?
Are we voting on this? No, huh? We're just discussing it. This is the first reading, right? Or do we want to vote on it?
I thought, technically, this is the third time it's been on the agenda. And we did discuss it, I thought, at the last meeting. So this should be a second reading.
Can we vote on it unless anyone?
Yep, we can.
And, oh, and just the discrepancy between the 15 minutes on BEDH and the 20 minutes on BEDH/E. We agreed that it would be 15 minutes on both documents because the chair can always
Extend.
choose to extend it.
Right.
Right.
What am I looking for? Oh, here we go.
And I do
Okay.
feel like
let me
if
look at the
people are generally
guidelines.
keeping to their 3 minutes, you generally have, it does give guidance that you have people come up one time, they have their 3 minutes. They could still submit longer comments for, so there's like it does specify all that to make sure that something longer is being considered and entered into public record. So there's a lot of different ways to be able to help consider that. And if people are following that and we still have more people come, I see no reason why we wouldn't extend to allow for anyone that wanted to make their comment and it's 3 minutes. You know, it just seems like that's
Well, that's what happens at
reasonable.
town meeting also. You get your
Yeah.
time, you go back to the end, you let everybody else go.
Yep. So,
All right, so I make a motion that we adopt policy, Maynard Public School Policy BEDH. Oh, what was the name of it? Public comments with, did you note an edit or that was on the procedural one?
The second one,
That was
which
the
is just a guideline. It's not.
Okay, that was the guidelines. Okay, so the policy. All right, so I make a motion that we adopt policy related to public comments, BEDH.
Second?
any discussion? All right, so because we're in a remote meeting setting, we're going to do a roll call vote for it. Mara Hogan,
Yes.
Natasha Rivera,
Yes.
Mary Branley,
Yes.
Lydia Clancy,
Yes.
Bethlen Houlihan, yes.
Oh, great.
Thank you. And then do we need to vote on BEDHE as well or no?
I think it's a guideline, so would that be?
It is the guideline, yeah. Okay, cool.
Is it like an appendix? It's kind of like an appendix, or
Yeah.
do we?
I think so. Is that your understanding of it, Mary Jane, Lydia?
Or do we need to vote on it? Should we vote on it anyway, just in case while we're?
Yeah.
Yep.
Okay.
Sure. So BEDHE, guidelines for public comment.
All right, I make a motion that we adopt the guidelines for public comments, BEDHE.
A second.
Any discussion? Okay, then by roll call vote, Mara Hogan,
Yes.
Natasha Rivera,
Yes.
Mary Branley. Oops. Mary Branley, we couldn't hear
Oh,
you.
sorry. Yes. Yes.
Lydia Clancy
Yes.
and Bethlen Houlihan, yes. So there's two other things that relate to this then is one, the adaptation to the remote environment while we're still doing virtual meetings until such time as that is relaxing. And even then, it's hard to tell the degree. So we may have to keep adapting the policy for varied scenarios as we move forward and phasing. But so one of the things that came up was that we do, if in order, and I think Irene made this suggestion at some point, that we try to have folks are doing for our regular meetings, that folks would still submit their comment via email up until the time of the citizens comment, and that I would read something and see about how many words 3 minutes comes out to. And we ask people to keep it to that amount of time. And when we're reading them, we get to that about that amount of time. If there's just like 2 more sentences or 3 more sentences, you could read that, but for the most part, then you'd say, all right, well, this is quite a bit longer. I'm read to this point, and then we're gonna still submit this for the full public record.
And legal actually did say that it was appropriate if you want to indicate or prescribe like 3 minutes or approximately 300 words.
Okay.
So kind of what Irene had previously mentioned, that seemed totally reasonable to do in this instance. So I think word counting is easier when you have an email. So it might be something for the community when they are sending it to just do an approximate word count. But that might be something that could be outlined, and I think it would need to be outlined from my understanding when we going
agenda.
forward. Yeah, on the agenda.
Yeah.
Beth, you had asked me to put together something for the public hearing.
Yes.
Which I did, and I put it in the, I unfortunately only got to putting it into our meeting folder for today, this afternoon. So it is in there. And, we can talk about that I don't know if you want to talk about that now or.
Yeah, if that's okay with people, I really think we should make sure that we've got a public hearing because it's different than our regular business meeting. The whole point of the public hearing is an opportunity for people to be able to engage and the community members to engage in the process by being able to share their thoughts and via comment publicly. And that's that. And we listen, like we receive those comments. Like that is what we're doing. 1 second. So Irene has something to say. I got to unmute you, Irene, if I can do it.
Okay.
Sometimes.
I just wanted to let you know that I looked it up because I was curious. I can save, somebody the hassle of doing this. The usual typical rate of speech in English is 150 words per minute. So you would go up to 450 words. Just thought I would clue you in.
Thank you.
Yeah, that is the science.
Yeah, when I was doing this part of the public hearing, I did go and take a look, and I actually shortened it just a little bit because, when you're there, who knows how fast or slow you're going to be talking. Right. So I said 350. So
okay, perfect. That's fine.
I do try to talk slower because you're trying to make sure people can hear and follow each word.
And then you get someone like me who could easily talk 300 words a minute.
Or me. I talk fast.
Yeah, good point. All right, so for the remote environment, while we're still doing virtual meetings, does that make sense as far as how we kind of?
Yeah, I think there's some I'm looking at Mauro, just based on our conversation with Sarah today. I think some part of number 3 we might need to revisit.
So wait, let's get into the public hearing in just a second. I just want to first just talk about. No, not at all. I don't want to confuse things. That's all. So the first thing was just with a regular meeting and making sure that we feel like while we're still doing it remotely, following what we were just looking at, that what we'll do for now is just add in that word count and pretty much keep things as they are for the remote meeting. As far as people submit their email and we read that up until they submit it by a certain time, it's specified on the agenda ahead of the citizens comment. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Okay. So that was that. Now let's go to public hearing. And so that, as I said, is very specific intent. What we do is we hear from the community, the public, about what's being suggested for the budget, and that is there's a presentation that Mary Jane was aware and we were going to be asking for the schools to do to show this is currently what the budget recommendations are. And Obviously, we talked about the fact that we're going to be continuing to look at this as we move forward, but at this point in time, here we are. We take the public comment and we're listening to that and receiving it, and then we move into a regular meeting, and at that time, we can talk through and discuss anything we want in relation to the budget, and based on what we've heard and any other considerations, and then you could make a vote to anyone can make a motion and make a vote to shift anything within the budget at that time. And so the public comment helps to inform that final, like, this is what we're going forward with for town meeting. Does that make sense?
I think so.
It doesn't preclude us from then at any point, as Mass pointed out, and we kind of went through last time, Dorothy Presser at the Mass Association of School Committees had pointed out that essentially it's within our purview to be able to go back every week and we could vote again and change the budget. It's not in our best interest, but that's just gives you a sense of it. This isn't saying that this is done there. And obviously, as we just talked about, there will be other considerations moving forward, and we'll be closely monitoring those as we look at budget implications. So in relation to that, for the public hearing, it is going to be in a remote environment. We'll be doing it through this Zoom platform. And so considering how we do that, it feels different than a regular meeting. So we wanted to consider other options and finalize those so that we can include that for people so that they understand and know very clearly how they will access the meeting and have the ability to do their public comment.
And the other part too, which I just want to highlight, is that Colleen and Adam did a great job in putting on the homepage access to the budget information for the community, which I know the public notice had a link to, but also I know when the agenda will get created, it will have access to the budget information and presentation for community awareness going into the public hearing. And so it was wasn't like 10 clicks down. It was really a lot more easily accessible from the homepage. So thank you, Colleen, again, and Adam.
So Mara was very graciously put together this document that kind of laid out what we would do for a public hearing. For the public hearing, Mara, just to be clear, I think that we have an hour for that portion.
Okay, yeah, I wasn't sure, and I looked at the agenda, and it doesn't actually say on the agenda how long we have, so I had no idea.
I don't know if anyone else knows offhand. Jennifer or Colleen or Mary Jane, what the amount of time we've had in the past for the public hearing portion?
I was actually looking back at former agendas for the public hearing today to see, because I know the agenda has to be formatted slightly different. It varies. Some years it was 30 minutes, some years it was an hour. It depends on the weight of the budget and what we think the public might need.
Yeah, okay. And we lead in with that. And then we would, if we needed to, the other thing that you can do, if it's going over and it's clear that there's more that needs to be said, then you can vote to extend it, but you have to like go into your, there's a process. I've got to make sure I've got this down, but you have to go into your regular meeting, vote to return to the public hearing. And so you vote out of the regular meeting and back into the public hearing, simply because anyone that read that posted document, they're coming to be able to, maybe they come in, maybe they're like, I don't care about the public hearing, but I care about agenda number 4. And so we need to make sure that we're very formal in how we consider that if we were going to change it. So one of the things we talked about, say, I don't know if we want to set a time. I feel like given everything that's going on, it seems fair to give an hour for the community.
Agree.
I think 1 hour is a good place to go.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yep.
Okay. All right, cool. And then we talked about different ways we could do this. So we could have a menu of options as long as we're clearly spelling out the different ways people can access, in case, depending on for at the time of the meeting, how they're accessing, if they're like on the phone and they're not at their computer right then, making sure they still are able to participate in this virtual meeting, just as have an option that works just as much as for anyone else. So with that in mind, we have a menu of options. So one is emailing comments, and it must state in the subject line public comment, and then we can add to it that we need people to keep it to, did you say 350 words? Yeah. Comments read by the chair will only be for 3 minutes. If the email comments are longer, they'll be cut off at the 3-minute mark. So it'd be about 350 words in order to get them. And then I think we should say that in here tomorrow, we can add in that people can submit, and it says that actually in the policy that we just passed, that people could submit a more lengthy comment. So they could submit like here's my shortened version for you to read. Here's my full comment that I want entered into public record.
Right.
So if we can add that, I think that's an important thing for us to be able to have.
Do you want me to, read you the mask policy for procedures for conducting hearings? Because it goes along with the BEDH.
Yeah.
It's an additional one. It's not very long. In conducting all public hearings required by law and others as it deems advisable, the school committee will, 1, give due and public notice in line with statutory requirements and seek to publicize the meeting in all local media. 2, make available printed information on the topic of the hearing. 3, give all persons an equal opportunity to be heard in accordance with the committee's policy. The chair of the committee will preside at the hearing. The public will be informed at the beginning of the hearing the particular procedure that will be followed in regards to questions, remarks, rebuttals, and any time limitations or other rules that must be followed to give everyone an opportunity to be heard. In conformance with customary hearing procedures, statements and supporting information will be presented first by the committee or by others for the committee to comment. Citizens must be recognized by the chair, and all remarks must be addressed to the chair and will be germane to the topic. To assure that all who wish to get a chance to speak, the chair will recognize persons who have not commented previously during the hearing before recognizing persons who wish to make a second remark.
Okay. So that is helpful. So I don't know, Mauro, if you feel like taking that, if we can integrate wording in for that from that. We would.
One that I would see would be 2D, where, because we've got right now, no citizen may comment more than once without permission of the chair. So that would be where, if you go through everybody that's already talked once, and then if people have a second one, so we could incorporate that piece of it.
Yeah, that sounds like a good spot.
I can share this document with everyone if they want.
Yeah, that would be helpful.
Yeah, that'd be great.
Okay.
So I've got a question. So nobody is actually going to verbally be able to talk, right? We're just going to take their written comments.
Well, that was one of the questions, and I wanted to check in with everyone and see the thinking as far as, I think it's difficult in the virtual environment. We want to make sure everyone's heard, and so we could have the option where if someone's present and able to unmute and they want to speak, it's how they are able to indicate that they want to speak. Go ahead, Natasha. That was one of the issues.
Yeah, so I know that I thought Colleen and Irene had talked about, because I know the phone piece was hard, right? Because I know the chat, you can raise your hand, and so it would require us monitoring like hand raising to know that someone wants to be recognized. And so you can then maybe at that point be unmuted and to speak potentially, which I think we agreed that the hand raising thing seemed like a promising consideration. But then I thought there was a procedural thing Irene had found with Zoom, and it might be tested to see if you press a 9 or something and you can do a hand, raise the hand on the phone.
I did say actually I was going to try and test that after our last meeting and totally forgot about it.
I just thought about it just now. So I
Calendar.
honestly forgot since our last meeting too.
Yeah. So
But
I put on my
just thought,
calendar to test in the
okay.
morning.
Okay, yeah, that would be helpful because if that can be added as well, I think that would be, I think allowing people to be recognized and then be heard will kind of keep to the spirit of what a public hearing really is, and for this important subject matter, I think it is really necessary to try to accommodate that with also safeguards that we're not having Zoom bombings, that we would have to shut the meeting down.
Yeah.
Because that would be obviously detrimental to everybody if that were the case. So anyway, I just wanted to see, because if that can be worked in, I would be all for the hand raising, and then be recognized by the chair in some capacity there, or maybe someone could put in a chat if they are, so wish it to the chair. But they'd have to have that, their name, just like we indicate, public name, because I think the hard part with the email, Bethlyn, and I think we've run across this, is that not everybody puts public comments, and some people only mean it for the eyes of the school committee. And, when it comes through, it's I know we've already run into an issue that somebody was like, oh, I didn't want that to be read in the public, and or I did want that to be read in the public, and it really is hard to navigate in that moment, and I don't think any of us is intending to cross that boundary, but this is where we are.
Yeah, and it's partially because we hadn't specified public comments. So then if someone has, like, especially in Gmail, it's like it's in the thread and it's further down where it says, please read this. So you have to be able to go through everything and figure it out right then. And I had a system where I was storing stuff, but if something new comes in during the meeting, before the comment, or even during, and you're trying to read and make sure you get it right, it's just, it makes for potential errors, and it's not fair to people if they did or didn't. It's so much harder to respect their wishes. So yeah, I think it would be nice to have the option. I think this is a special kind of meeting for people to be able to speak. And if we can figure out how they could do that if they're on the phone, that they have a way to raise their hand even on the phone, that would be, I think then we have a caterer of options. We could say, like, all right, so we're going to start with, I wouldn't mind if we forewent email for this particular one, because you're trying to be present to people speaking, and like the people that are trying to say, like, it's just a proposal. But if we want to offer a menu of options and let people pick the one that feels most comfortable to them, given what we've been talking about everyone's range of comfort with technology, and etc., then I'd feel like everyone had the level of access they need. So if we do feel comfortable with that and we lay that out for everyone and include the email, so even though it's a little trickier, I would just read through, like, I would start with like, all right, we're going to take people whose hands are raised. Now I'm going to read what's in the chat. Now I'm going to read what's in the email, or like something like that.
I think by having people be able to talk, it would really cut down on the email and the chat.
Yeah. So if that works, then I'd love for us to then we attach with the materials, the agenda, we're able to give those instructions so people know. And
I did have a couple of comments or notes on the side that I just wanted to, we talked a little bit more about shortly before, but that came out of
guidance.
Yeah, Sarah's feedback. So nothing that really needs to be discussed more broadly, but yeah.
Samara, do you feel cool with trying to, like, take what we talked about and drop that? And then I think we could put, like, here's what the point of the public hearing, here's what the objective of public hearing, what it's for at the top too. And then
Is
how
there
people,
somewhere that has that?
yeah, I think I found this website where it kind of just gave an explanation of it, but
Okay.
I think maybe I'd literally Googled it to try to find something that would be useful. But it might be something we could try to just reach out to Dorothy and see if she has anything that she could succinctly provide. But I can send you what I found too.
Okay.
Anything else on that?
No.
Thank you. I appreciate having the conversation because I just wanted to make sure that we were being thoughtful about it because we're in this virtual environment.
Yeah, it's
So
important.
I guess one question that I did have was, so part of this is just pulled from our normal public comment. So I wasn't sure about the number 3 with the individuals may address topics on the agenda. So are we only having people talk about the budget, or so we should?
Yeah, that's what yeah. And then we will have in the regular meeting, there will be a citizen's comment for that regular meeting agenda.
Okay.
And then I think what's just to be aware, the agenda is going to end up being longer because we'll have an hour for, if we have an hour for the actual, if we want that of airtime for people, quote unquote, then we have to build in a little time for the presentation too. So it'll be a little longer to allow for that opening presentation. All right.
Okay.
Okay. So we need to get that done for Tuesday. Is that what we said?
Yeah, looks like, yeah, because it has to be posted Tuesday because Monday's the holiday.
Yeah.
And we're going to have a separate page, right, for the public. That's what we're talking about.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So Mara, if you don't mind taking another stab at it, I'm happy to look at it and then we can.
Yeah, I'm not entirely sure how to do the raise your hand option, but I'll take a stab at it and we can talk about it.
It might be something that maybe even in the Zoom instructions, maybe.
Yeah. We, all
Okay.
the time, we Google for Zoom instructions and list them for participants for stuff.
Okay.
So there should be some pretty clear instructions for that. So hopefully you'll find that easily. Or
Yeah, I
Colin
would
can help
definitely
you.
say don't reinvent the wheel there if you don't have to, for sure.
Okay. Bethlyn, for if we're going to do the raise the hand thing, do you want to assign one of us to be monitoring the hand raising so that you don't have to monitor and Colleen doesn't have to because she's going to be taking minutes?
Yeah, if Natasha is vice chair, does it make sense for you to do that? I don't know.
Am I watching the hands? Is that what I'm doing? I'm doing the order. I'm doing like the ticket lady, like number 1, number 2. Is that what I'm doing?
Yeah, like the deli counter.
Yep, I will be deli counter duty.
Okay.
All
No
right.
soup for you.
No, oh gosh, please, Lydia. Okay, Lydia, you're not doing the deli counter.
All right, cool.
Yeah, I'll do it.
Great. And we can do a little practice before too, so we know, make sure we have it down. Okay, great. So then you want to give us just the rundown of what we can expect next for policies, Lydia?
I super do. Okay, so status INJDD. Mary Jane, have you sent that to MEA yet?
I just talked to Mike about that today. I was waiting to hear back from Sarah. I
Okay.
just got literally Sarah just sent it to me right after our meeting today. So I did talk to Mike Waldron and I sent it to him probably about 6:30 right before this thing started. So hopefully they'll have a look at it.
Is that the social media policy?
Yeah.
Social media policy. So it's been vetted by legal. It's now with the MEA, and then we can vote on it at our meeting in June. Or do we want it for our public hearing next week?
I don't think he'll have it ready by next week. He's gonna.
Okay, so
it'll
our
take
meeting
some
in
time.
June.
It's a pretty meaty document.
Yeah.
He
All
won't
right.
have. There's no way that'll be done. I mean, we have Memorial Day. There's no way.
Okay. So just for my information, are we going to do any policy review at our meeting next Thursday, or are we just going to push it all until the meeting in June?
I think you have a lot on the plate already.
We may need to do, just as a heads up, an executive session before the public hearing or before a meeting,
Okay.
based on conversations we had at the negotiation subcommittee. So Sarah, we can schedule it. We're waiting for confirmation back from the town. But if we get that, it sounded like we would be able then to discuss the MOA, because the timing of the events is that we have to vote on an MOA The BOS has to vote on it. The vote can happen at their meeting, but we have to let them know that we're ready for that. And then then Mary Jane would be able to post the job for the facilities director.
Right. I forgot about that. It was only, earlier today, Natasha. Good.
I know. Well, as we're talking about it, it's like, right there. Otherwise, if I wait for the weekend, I'll forget. But so it sounded like where we left off, it was Sarah advised to put it on the agenda. And we would have to vote on the MOA in public because it's a board-to-board agreement, is how she advised. So we can discuss and deliberate it in executive session, but then our vote would have to be in public.
Mm-hmm.
So is that the same MOA that we looked at, that we sent you critiques, or is
Yeah.
that?
Yes.
Okay, all right, so it won't have
Yep.
changed, so we know what we're voting on, okay.
Yeah, the MOA, there's maybe some small tweaks. We took your feedback, Mary, and we shared that with Sarah, and everyone else who sent feedback. But we can discuss that in executive session on what that is. But you should not be nothing substantial that you would see any difference on. And also, down the road, we're actually going to have another MOA, but this can be done after we do the hiring, about just clarification on duties, who's the ownership of certain things, which is not tied necessarily to the director, but just general town versus school department. I think that we all felt that there's some clarity, very general, that needs to be ironed out, so there's consistency year to year with that is not lost with turnover.
Mm-hmm.
So
Great,
Okay.
thank you for that work.
So what's coming down the pipeline? KHA, public solicitations in schools. KHB, advertising on school property. KHB-A, display of banners at alumni fields. And Colleen has found several policies from other districts that are similar to what we're looking to do at alumni field. And so I am going to be reviewing those and sort of tailoring them to our situation, and I'll put that document, once I have it ready, in the folder for our June meeting. And then in addition to that, to piggyback on the BEDH and BEDHE that we just adopted, there's BEDB and BEDB/E, which are agenda format policies and guidelines.
Oh, and Lydia, just as a heads up, I think we have some parallel conversations because we're talking about ownership of the fields.
Okay.
And so, like fencing, that we did talk about that a little bit. So I think all the fields.
Okay.
So I think we can talk more in executive session next week about that piece. But it may have some policy implications that you're working on.
Okay, great, thank you. And that's, I think that's probably enough for now. We tabled the homework assignment, considerations for holidays and whatnot, because everybody's only doing homework right now.
7 days a week.
Yeah. So we'll deal with that when things need to get back to normal at some point. And that's it for policy, unless there's something else you're thinking that I forgot, Bethlyn or Mary Jane. Okay.
No, I think you did a good job.
Oh,
Thank
that's
you.
good.
Thank you, Lydia. Thank you, everybody.
Welcome.
All right, so that was our last agenda item. So this is a special meeting, so we don't have members' comments tonight.
I make a motion, we adjourn.
I second.
We'll adjourn by roll call vote. Mara Hogan,
Yes.
Natasha Rivera,
Yes.
Mary Branley,
Yes.
Lydia Clancy,
Yes.
Bethlyn Houlihan. Yes, 10:10 p.m. We are adjourning, people.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you,
Thank
everyone.
you.